got some interesting stats. Like the first sprint, which is not too much to write home about. But to be fair, we will put in some other stats for why this was like this. But it was really a walking skeleton, or what's known as a tracer bullet, where we tried to do, we did a story which was the authentication story, and we tried to hit every different interface. And it seemed at first that it was just our internal web service, from Excel to the internal web service to our third-party supplier. But we also had to deal with things like the firewall stopped us from making progress, and also we couldn't run the Excel spreadsheet, and this happened over Christmas. So at the beginning of this project we weren't able to run the spreadsheet, and we couldn't access our third-party supplier. As you can imagine, hindered a bit of development. But in the second sprint we see things looking a lot better. Suspiciously good, actually. And the third sprint, here we hit some problems with our third-party supplier. We thought something was done, and we realized actually there's still an issue there, so we said it wasn't ready for the next phase. And then right at the end we have some extremely sharp lines going down, which I think this shows that the application is starting to settle down a bit, and we have to do less testing. It's more just adding tests as opposed to creating new ways of testing. And I think this shows that if these guys, what they can do going forward is finish some work and push the application through all the testing phases needed to go live, which is quite impressive after just 3 iterations. And I think we don't have any, more discussions about automated tests coming up, so I'll just remind me to talk about that if I forget. So we basically just used Excel to manage our project, and in addition to what you would typically find in a Scrum project, the burn down charts and the stories being marked as done, we also tracked where things were each day. So how many were in the backlog, how many had been started, and then we also have little comments at the end of each column. Something interesting happens, we put a comment, and then this can get converted into a cumulative flow diagram, which actually has a lot more information than a burn down chart. So we can see here, for instance, these 3 blocked items here, that is over the period, there's 3 days, I think, between Christmas and New Year's, where we couldn't actually make a lot of progress. Well, not real progress, those stories were kind of blocked. Later on we got blocked again with our third-party supplier, and what the guys did was decide to actually make a workaround, and we were in a strange situation where we had to make our code future-proof. So when the third-party client did fix their problems, our code would still work. I think it's a good sign when you're going faster than your provider. And so this shows work that is ready for UAT, and then at the end, basically it all went into UAT, and all went into ready for live, and almost all of it, except for that stuff at the time. So we did have some concurrent development. I think this was the one about the user story the mapping, but it was also a little bit sequential at the end with our user acceptance testing and that sort of thing. So this shows a burn down chart, and then you can also see the same thing happening from that date to that date on our cumulative flow diagram. And you can actually see what the guys were doing between here and here, and they were working on UAT and fixing a little problem that came out in UAT. Also with Kanban, I said one of the things I wanted to talk about is using Kanban along with Scrum. And one of the principles of Kanban is to keep the work in progress very limited, so that the quality is high, actually. It really helps if you just do one little bit at a time. You can really focus and improve quality. And the green line here shows work that the guys were doing on business value stories. So we see only about 1 or 2 stories at most, and then at the end there were 3 because there was a bit of stuff to finish off with the workaround and all that stuff. But for the most part, it was just 1 or 2 stories progressing through the system. And things like this. On this day, we did a code review. So this was at the end of Thursday. We did a code review. And then this was at the end of the sprint, so all stories were finished. And instead of starting new stories, the guys were left alone, basically, to do whatever they wanted. And what they wanted to do was write automated tests and implement the changes, or some of the changes that came up in the code reviews. And I think this shows a pull system where developers take on new stories when they're ready, and it wasn't really pushed onto them at all. We also kept more typical Scrum diagrams where you see things that are planned and actual. This was low because of our third-party supplier giving trouble to us. And we see things moving along there as well. This is all story points, while the cumulative flow diagram in this case was just a number of stories. We had block stories, and our manager actually did a very good job. He called our third-party supplier and built up a bit of a relationship with them. So the developer we were dealing with was just saying things like, oh, that'll be ready by Friday or Tuesday or whatever, and it never was. And once we understood their release cycle and this sort of stuff a lot better, then we could, we knew when the guy was talking rubbish and we could plan around it a lot better. Pull system. Yeah, so along with the pull system, these guys spent about 30% of the time not implementing new stories. This 30% is things like setting up continuous integration, setting up, doing automated tests, refactoring after a code review, that sort of thing. And it just shows that when we plan, we shouldn't forget about a huge chunk that needs to happen in order to do a good job. I think this is one of the reasons why projects run over projects so often. Okay. Maybe you guys want to say what it was like to work so closely with the product owner.
So quick question, how did you code review if you worked in pair? Did you work in pair all the time?
They did work in pairs all the time, and actually
code review, how did you
with peers, other developers.
Yeah.
There's a much bigger development team. It just happened to be that because this was over Christmas, it was a small project. Just the two of us worked on it. So there's about 15 other developers in the company.
Right. Okay.
So a group of them we used different people at different times. So.
Yeah. Actually, one of the reasons we had the code review is because it was just the two of these guys working together, and I thought it was unfair for them to come up with a good design on their own. So we had one code review, and then we had another one because in the retrospective these guys said they wanted more of that. So we did that. Yeah, I think the point here is that we involved our user, or it's both the user and product owner. She was very involved all the time, and sometimes halfway through a sprint I would just send an email saying how far we were, and she came to every single demo, and then on a follow-up project she's even coming to the sprint planning meetings. So it's very good to take care of your product owner. We even got a cookies. There's cookies at the beginning. That's what we have at our demos. Yeah, so I think it was really nice actually to have somebody who can show what little work you've done over the sprint. And it's good to have access to the information sources, not necessarily just the information, but the people who want the thing. It's good to be able to talk to them and understand without any kind of confusion or limit. Because there is also confusion that comes from one person. So if just a BA gets the requirements and passes that on to a developer, I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's better to have the developer go with the BA to sort things out.
Isn't that just that specification?
Do you mean about gathering the requirements?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a position of actually handing out a statement to the users of the company that you're developing the software for,
yeah,
that means they haven't actually done proper user gathering analysis of products, and they have described it to you wrong enough that you find yourself having to speak to the users on the other side.
But perhaps what if the developer was there from the beginning? Then they wouldn't have to do a transfer. I think that's my pushing for. And I think that if a developer speaks to the product owner, especially at this beginning phase, they are a lot more engaged with the project.
No, it's not product owner. Than to speak to the users.
Oh, sorry, in this case our user and the product owner were the same people.
Right.
Okay, yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, okay, it's better just to go to one. We were going to one person. Okay.
I think, sorry.
Yeah.
I think the question, or at least the way I understood your question, is that if you spend more time up front gathering the requirements, you don't need to talk to the users. Is that what you said?
No, I misunderstood what you just said. If the product owner and the user is the same person, in effect, then you have a dynamic communication going on.
Do you mean too many?
No, dynamic in the sense that there is a feedback and result that's going on all the time.
Yeah.
The way I understood it was that you actually spoke to the users in the other company to get more feedback.
Okay, so just to give you some context, this is all actually within one company, 2 buildings, but one company.
Yes.
And so I guess that makes it a bit easier for us to build up a good relationship with our product owner.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was both the product owner and she would be the user when it was finished. And
Right.
yeah, and she was we actually felt a bit sorry for her at one point. Well, we were a bit concerned that we were asking her to make some decisions that will affect her whole team, specifically with the user, the mapping. That's why we were happy to, we were engaged enough to care, and then we moved the story back. We went through the effort of working around that problem. And I think, yeah, so for that reason, I think it's good to have a healthy relationship with the product owner. Maybe it's better if I say that. Yeah, if you try to collect all the requirements first and you try to do all the design first, then you end up with this relay race. And actually, back to the new product development game, I think I've moved one image, but basically they found that this to be a very slow approach because the bottleneck in one phase can slow down the other phase. And in that paper, actually, they talk about, they're making an analogy between a relay and a rugby team moving the ball down the field. And that's pretty much where the analogy of Scrum comes from. Okay, so do we need anybody else in the team if we're doing all this work ourselves? And get back to this paper, in case you haven't noticed, it's very good. And they say it's a good idea. You want different people from different fields in the same team because it fosters diverse ideas and concepts. Okay. What about developers doing requirements and testing? Isn't this then task switching? And one of the things which came up in our retrospective was, Tim, you said that you were doing a lot of task switching, particularly over Christmas.
Yeah, I was pulled off at one stage to help with something else, and that made it over a day difficult for me to get back into one thing or the other,
Yeah. So those were multiple projects.
Yeah. Yeah, completely different, very different things. Yeah.
And what people have found is that if the focus and the scope is small enough, it actually fits in very well with the way we work. But if it's large, like swapping between projects, that's when you start to get this performance hit, and you don't get to get that engaged, and you don't get this time to be creative. So, and we have this diagram here from Jerry Weinberg, who says that if you're on one project only, you can focus 100% of the time. But should you go into 2 projects, then per project you have a 10% hit. You have a 10% time where you start to wonder where you left off and where you should carry on from. So this diagram shows the person is on 2 projects. Per project they're spending now 40% of their time on each project, and 20% is going just to waste. And it gets worse and worse the more projects you're on. So I'm a big believer in people just working on one and only one project. The other way to look at it, this is a very good page to go to actually. That guy has, on that page we see a lot of data being accumulated and shown in nice diagrams like this. So in the top diagram you see people working on multiple projects, and then if they had to all work on the same project, you can be pretty much guaranteed it'll be finished a lot sooner than otherwise. And here, if you imagine this is all really making money at this point, that's a very good place to be. And if you take out the waste that you get with context switching, what happens is it's possible to come in even sooner than that date at the end there. So you could even come in a bit sooner, but you're guaranteed to start delivering, and the IT department becomes less of a black hole because they start delivering complete products. And they start delivering bigger chunks. Okay. Yeah, so on this project we did a lot of test-driven development, continuous integration, and also paired programming. Mainly because this does help improve focus, but also for quality reasons. And how did you guys find? So you're doing this for the first time, right? Paired programming. I think you've already given your thoughts on this. That it took a bit of a while to get used to, but then after a while it became second nature.